Today, we're talking about renting or buying in 2025. What makes sense for you and your family?
I keep it real. I keep it real. I keep it real. Just keep it real.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Sam Hartman, keeping it real estate here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And as always, I am here to bring the clarity you need to the real estate world so that you can make confident real estate decisions in your life. And today, I'm talking about the age-old question of renting versus buying. And this is not a rental shame video. This is not a video to talk you into buying a home, because there are pros and cons to each side. And I want to talk about those pros and cons. I want to talk about what's happening in today's market so that you can make the right decision for you and your family when it comes to making the decision of whether to rent a home or to buy a home. And so let's start with just some of the really key reasons and valid reasons why someone would rent a home. And the number one reason I think that's a really valid reason to rent is that you value your mobility. You know, maybe you don't want to live in the city that you live in any longer, or maybe you want to switch neighborhoods more frequently. You know, maybe your dream job is in the mountains. Maybe you want to live near the beach. And if you value that mobility, I tell you rent, to pick up and leave and not be as tied down to a home and having to sell a home and liquidate a home to be able to make that next move could be really advantageous to you. Now, I will say, though, if you're going to live in a location for the next 5 years, personally, I think it makes sense to buy. I think that's enough time to leverage the gain of equity with the appreciation of the real estate market. I think you're going to put more money into your pocket by making your monthly mortgage payments and basically depositing that money into a savings account with your mortgage. So if you have a 5-year window where you are going to live in one spot, I think it is worth at least considering, do I buy a home in this location and leverage the benefits of wealth building and homeowner equity gains through price appreciation and everything like that. The second reason I think is very valid to rent is maybe you're not ready to buy yet. Maybe you need more time to save money for a down payment. Maybe you need time to improve your credit score. Now, I do want to head off one common misconception in real estate. You don't need 20% down to buy a home. A lot of first-time home buyer programs will require a minimum of 3.5% down. Really, I've seen as low as 1% down, conventional loan programs. And there's even loan programs that are 0% down as well. So certainly you want to make sure that you're living below your means, you're saving money monthly, you're budgeting in what that new mortgage payment might be, and saving for that down payment, but you might be closer than you think. So if that is something that's holding you back, and you do have homeownership on the horizon as a goal, whether this year or in the future, maybe you're closer than you think. Maybe it's worth starting to take a few next steps to see what might be possible. So 3 questions I always ask a buyer or an interested buyer before helping them make the next steps into the pursuit of home ownership is your job stable? I want to make sure that you can count on that career, you can count on that support, you can count on that income. Number 2, is your income stable? Maybe you're in a highly bonused or highly commissioned type of a position. So, maybe this year you had a great sales year and you have all this money and you want to go buy a big expensive house, but if your income is not stable, if you can't count on that year after year, maybe we do need to pull back a little bit. And number 3, is your location stable? Is this a place you want to live? Is this a place your job is going to keep you for the foreseeable future? Like I said before, if you're going to be in a location for at least 5 years or more, I think it's worthwhile at least considering purchasing versus renting during that 5 years to see how homeownership can help build your wealth. So let's dive into what's happening in today's market, renting versus owning, how those dynamics are playing off of each other. I want to start with a quote from Realtor.com that says, in 2025, renting is expected to remain a more cost-effective option than buying. What they're saying there is that renting could be more affordable than buying in a lot of real estate markets. And this is especially true for young renters who don't have access to high home equity to use for their purchase. So current homeowners have had a lot of high equity gains over the last 5 years. They can leverage that equity to make their move into their new home. But first-time home buyers who are maybe renting don't have that leverage. They don't have the access to those funds. So you might be looking at putting a lower down payment down and not having access to a large lump of cash funds to be able to do, say, a 20% down payment. But I want to highlight there, it did say that renting right now could be more affordable. So, maybe renting that 1-bedroom apartment or a 2-bedroom apartment could really help your savings over this year to help you towards that down payment and help you become a homeowner in the near future. But where that falls, renting a 4-bedroom house is almost always, at least in our market, going to be more expensive than going and buying a 4-bedroom home as well. I always like to run the numbers of what the mortgage expenses would look like on a new listing to see, could someone rent this home more cheaply? And almost always it comes out to say, no, someone would not be able to rent a similar type home for the same amount that they could pay their taxes, their insurance, and their mortgage. So when you get into the single family homes, a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath home, a home with a basement, to be able to rent those homes for less than what you could afford on the monthly mortgage payment, I don't think it necessarily stacks up that way. But another quote here from Redfin says, 2025 will be a renter's market. Many Americans will remain renters or become renters. While the cost of buying a home will increase, rental affordability could improve. We expect the median U.S. asking rent to remain flat in 2025. There are also many more rentals coming to the market. Now, this is a dynamic I think that's playing heavily in the rental market right now. I've got a graph here. If we go back to 2020 during the pandemic when interest rates became really low, a very large number of apartment developments came into the works because they could finance those developments really cheaply. So over the last couple of years, these projects have now started coming to completion, and those large number of rental units across the US are now starting to come into the market because those projects are now done. So we are seeing more rental options hitting the market, which is keeping those rental values fairly flat, which really could help the affordability if you need to continue renting in today's market. But let's take another look at a graph here that shows the historic rental increases dating all the way back to 1988. Me, just a wee little 2-year-old, wasn't even considered renting or buying a home at that time. But this shows you how rent increases over time. And so typically rent does increase over the years. Me, I've got a few partners that we own a few rentals, and we usually increase our rent by about 3% every year. That is a low percentage. We like to be on the kinder side of the landlordship, giving renters the benefit of the doubt. And honestly, if we've got great renters in there, we want to keep them in there and we want to keep them happy. But you can see rental increases happen every year. So that affordability, even as a renter, even though things might remain fairly flat this year, could definitely be changing in the years to come. So homeownership, although there are some additional costs of maintenance and repair to a home, typically with your 30-year fixed rate mortgage, those expenses are going to remain pretty flat and pretty consistent for you. So let's look at a survey done by Credit Karma at 2 of the top reasons that people are deciding to rent versus buy. And the number one reason, with 48% of respondents saying they just can't afford a home. And that is totally fair. Obviously, if you can't afford a home, you can't buy a home. You have to rent. So that's a totally valid reason. I challenge it a little bit, though, because I think a lot of people assume they can't afford a home, but maybe they don't even take the next steps to pursuing what the options are. Maybe they think they need 20% down to buy a home. Maybe they've been told that the housing market's going to crash by their uncle. And so they're like, well, I'm not going to buy a home in this market. So there's a lot of education that we can do and that's part of what I'm trying to do here with my YouTube channel is bring context and clarity to you so that you can make the confident decision. But obviously, if you can't afford it, you can't do it, that's going to result in you having to rent. And you don't need to feel bad about that. 1/3 of our nation is renters, and it's always consistent with that 1/3 percentage about. So don't feel bad. You're not alone. Obviously, if you want to pursue homeownership, let's take the next steps and plan for that future. But also, you don't need to feel shame. You don't need to feel bad about being a renter in today's market. But the second reason people say that they're going to rent this year, 24% say that because mortgage rates are too high to make a buy being worthwhile to them. I am definitely going to challenge this perspective. I'm in an investment group. We buy flips and we buy rental properties. It just kind of depends what the opportunity on the market is for us. But we are actively looking to acquire properties in this market. You know why? Because buyer demand is lower. So we're actually able to get a better deal on the home. So yes, interest rates suck, and they've been up around 7+% for way longer than anyone really expected. But if you can look at that 7% interest rate and you can find a budget and a price point that fits your financial picture, I would encourage you to be a buyer in today's market because you have opportunity to negotiate yourself a great deal on the house that you buy. And then if and when interest rates fall in the future, you can leverage that better interest rate through a refinance to now make your payment more affordable. I want to tell a quick little anecdotal story here. A lot of people wish they bought a home in 2020 and 2021 when interest rates were 3% or lower. But the real people that benefited from that time were not the home buyers, but they were the homeowners that already owned their home, because they didn't have to go out into a really competitive real estate market and be competing for offers and trying to buy a home that they like. They already owned a home. So they just got to sit back, refinance into this beautiful 3%, 2.75% interest rate, and just see how their payment dropped and see how they could leverage that affordability. So the benefit for you as a buyer in today's market is leveraging low buyer demand and increasing available homes for sale to get yourself a good deal on your property. And then in the future, if we do see rates in the 6%, if we do get rates down to the 5% in the future, you can take advantage of that additional affordability by refinancing your home at that time. Now, there's a lot of concern from buyers out there. Check this out. From this Home Buyer Insight report, 70% feel that they're not making a good long-term investment in their future. And 72% worry that rent increases in the future could affect their current and long-term finances. And that's what I talked about, one of the pros and cons between renting and buying. When you rent, those increases can happen every year. When you buy, your mortgage payment is fixed. You might have small increases in your insurance or your taxes each year, but that cost of housing isn't on a 30-year fixed term. And so you can count on that, and you can budget for that, and you can plan for that. And so to the 70% of renters that fear they're not making a good financial decision, awareness is step number one. Don't feel shame that you're renting, but if you want to make that better financial decision, start the planning now. It might take a few years for you to save the money for a down payment. It might take you some time to be prepared to be a home buyer. But if you're not taking steps towards planning and you're just looking and saying, "Oh, I'll never do it, I'll never achieve it," then you're absolutely right. You never will. We need to start taking the steps sooner to make sure you're prepared when the timing is right for you. And just to further drive home this point, a Gallup poll showing Americans' opinion of the best long-term investment shows, again, year after year, that most Americans believe that home ownership is truly the best long-term investment. Now, is it going to give you the highest percentage yield, the highest gains? Maybe not. There's probably a lot of years where the stock market is outperforming general house appreciation, but you are going to have to pay for your housing one way or another. So by owning your home, you're investing and paying yourself equity every time you make a mortgage payment, but you're also seeing price appreciation gains year after year that you own the home. So I like to think of your home less as an investment, more of like a savings account, because every time you pay that mortgage, you're making a little bit of a deposit. And then all the other equity gains on top of that with price appreciation or home improvements that you do because you just want to love your home, that's cherry on top. That's the type of thing that is just really future beneficial, great. But overall, you just want to love the home that you're in. Now, remember that graph I showed you that showed the rental increases back to 1988? Well, check out home price appreciation since 1988. These graphs look almost identical, except one, you're paying more in rent, and two, you're making more from the equity gains in your home. So let's put these ones side by side. And you can see the green graph shows price appreciation. The red graph shows rent increases. And it just shows how starting sooner in time can actually give you more wealth into the future. So if you're thinking is now the right time for me to buy a home, it's not about timing the market. It's not about it being the right time in the market to buy a home. Is it the right time for you? Because the sooner, the better. Because the sooner you buy a home, the more you leverage that wealth building opportunity of home ownership. And so let's finish with a quote from Bankrate that says, no matter which way the real estate market is leaning, buying now means you can start building equity for your future. And that exactly is why homeowner net worth is 40 times that of a renter. The wealth opportunity, the wealth gains, the equity gains of price appreciation, the equity gains of home improvement, the equity gains of just paying your monthly payment. When you pay your landlord every month, that puts money in his pocket and it doesn't build any equity gains for you in your future. Again, this is not meant to shame renters. This is not meant to tell you you're dumb for not buying a home, because there are a lot of people that can't buy a home and there are a lot of people that just don't want to buy a home. And those are fine reasons. But if you think home ownership is a goal you have for your future, you need to start the conversation, the education, the learning and understanding of how to make that happen and how it can benefit you financially for the long haul. Because this year might be more affordable to rent than to buy. But if we zoom out, if we have a longer horizon of view, you might just see that buying a home could be a really great advantage for you and your family. I hope this information is helpful, guys. If you haven't had a chance to like and subscribe to my channel, I want to encourage you to make sure you don't miss this kind of content and future content. And if you have questions, if you have recommendations, and if you have other things you want to hear me talk about, let me know in the comments and I'll make sure to get a video out there just to you and your questions. That's it for me today. Make sure you keep it real estate out there, guys. Thanks for sticking with me.
I keep it real. Just keep